Have you ever found yourself thinking that the financial system seems designed only for those who already have money to spare? As if the rules were created to ensure that the rich continue to get richer while the others remain the same. An example of this is the much discussed Rule 20 for Ford 10, the famous car financing formula that everyone seems to know. 20% down payment, 4-year financing, and installments that don't exceed 10% of your income. But does it really work for those who earn little? Have you ever tried applying this rule to your life and felt like it was a game you simply have no chance of winning? The impression is that with this rule, those who don't have much money are automatically out. And if you think that only those with a good income can use this rule, then you're not alone. Has that ever crossed your mind? The problem is that almost no one talks about the real obstacles faced by those at the bottom of the financial pyramid when trying to follow this magic formula. The numbers may make sense, but is this financial model truly accessible to everyone? And more importantly, is it a form of protection or just another trap? Financial trap for those who don't have even the slightest breathing room? After all, with a tight salary and a reality full of unexpected events, how can someone afford a car payment without jeopardizing everything they've worked so hard to achieve? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you. Let's look at this rule from another perspective, and you'll realize that the real secret might be quite different from what you've been told. But is it really the key to financial freedom the cause of financial entrapment? What you're about to understand in the next few minutes will change the way you view car financing. And if you felt left out until now, you might be closer to a solution than you think. And before we continue, tell me, have you ever tried applying this rule to your life? What was the experience like? Stick around, because what comes next will transform your perspective on what really matters when it comes to financial education and consumer decisions. Now that you've begun to understand what's at stake, tell me, what is your experience with this type of financial decision? Have you ever experienced something like this? Have you ever tried applying the 24-10 rule and felt it was an insurmountable barrier? Leave a comment below telling us what touched you the most or what you think about it, because your opinion and experience can help someone who is going through this right now. If this video is making you reflect, or if you're starting to see the financial landscape in a different way, like the video to show me that you want to continue receiving content like this. Your interaction is very important so that more people discover this information and, who knows, change their perspectives as well. Oh, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, take advantage now and click on that button. Here we will always bring you strategies, reflections, and insights, which can help you make more informed decisions and avoid financial pitfall. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content, and that makes all the difference, especially when we're talking about real financial education. By liking and commenting, you become part of this community that seeks transform the way we deal with money. And that's precisely what will help more and more people break free from the traps imposed by the financial system. For now, let's stop here, because the story isn't over yet. We'll continue this reflection, and who knows, maybe even show you a solution you never imagined was possible. The 24-10 rule is one of the most cited formulas when it comes to car finance, but do you really understand what it means? Over the years, it has been sold as the recipe for success for those who want to acquire a car responsibly. But the truth is that behind each number, there is a greater purpose. Let's break this down now. A Rule 24-10 boils down to 3 parts. 20% entry, financing for a maximum of 4 years, and installments that do not exceed 10% of your monthly income. It seems simple, right? However, the reality for those who earn little is not so simple. When we think about 20% entry, we're talking about a considerable amount of money, often beyond the reach of those who can barely pay their monthly bills. If you earn, for example, $2,000 per month, 20% entry for a car costing $30,000, that's $6,000 down payment. This means you'd have to save up that amount before even thinking about financing the rest. For many, this down payment is a major obstacle, isn't it? Now, the funding of 4 years, it can also be a big challenge. Did you know that although a car payment might fit into your budget initially, it can become a much bigger burden over time? The problem is that when the term is long, you end up paying much more interest, and the total cost of the car becomes much higher than planned. This increase in total cost, it's not something everyone notices at first, and that's precisely where many people find themselves trapped in a loan that seems designed to last a lifetime. And finally, we have the installments that should not exceed 10% of your monthly income. This is the item that many people fail to meet. When you earn little, the 10% margin seems like an illusion. Let's take the example of a $2,000 salary. According to the rule, you should pay a maximum of $200 in installments. However, in practice, car prices don't match this limit. Either you buy a very cheap car, or the installment will exceed this amount, and you end up compromising a considerable part of your income. As a result, you lose the ability to financially plan for other important things, such as health, education, or leisure. And that's not a fair choice. So instead of seeing the Rule 20-18 win like a magic formula that will take you straight to success, think of it as a risk filter. She wasn't created to stifle her dreams, but rather to protect you from financial traps that can imprison you. This rule was created to prevent you from falling into excessively long-term financing agreements with excessively high installments, which will leave you without financial freedom in the future. The idea is precisely that, to ensure that the installment amount doesn't prevent you from living a quality life, so that you don't end up paying too high a price for the car and still have money left over to take care of other priorities. This risk filter is a way to help you make decisions smarter and safer, so that you don't have to take on debt that will ultimately harm your quality of life. Basically, the rule serves to show that the more you plan, the better, the more freedom you'll have in the future. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject. So how do we apply this rule intelligently without it becoming a limiting factor? Is there a way to use this rule not only for buy the car of your dreams, but also to ensure that he will not compromise his financial future? Let's understand this in more depth. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. If you're also looking for more conscious ways to manage your finances and want to understand how to apply these tips in your daily life. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because here the conversation stops being theoretical and touches directly on real life. When we talk about those who earn little, we're not talking about lack of control, irresponsibility, or inherently bad choices. We're talking about people who live under constant pressure, with salaries that barely keep up with the cost of living, rising rent, more expensive food, piling up bills, and often the real need for a car to get to work, take their children to school, or simply avoid wasting hours on precarious transportation. And it is precisely at this point that the controversy arises. There's a silent, almost cruel narrative that goes like this. If you can't follow the 4-20-10 rule, the problem is you. As if the difficulty were moral, as if it were a lack of discipline or the wrong mindset. This is a hidden truth that almost no one questions, because it's easier to blame the individual than to look behind the scenes of the credit system, the abusive interest rates, and the way consumption is pushed as an immediate solution to any discomfort. Those who earn little don't want a luxury car. Most of the time, they want mobility, dignity, and time. But the system doesn't offer fair options. It offers long payment plans, high interest rates, confusing contracts, and a false sense of victory at the moment of signing. Social pressure does the rest. Everyone seems to be moving forward, changing cars, showing off their achievements, while you feel like you're falling behind. And then the decision ceases to be rational and becomes emotional. It's at this moment that many traps are set. The problem has never been the person who earns little. The problem is a model that profits from urgency, from a lack of financial education, and from the idea that waiting is failing. When someone blows their budget to buy a car, it's rarely because they don't care about the future. Often, it's because they're trying to survive in the present. And that completely changes how we need to look at this discussion. In this context, the 4-20-10 rule becomes almost a symbol of exclusion. Not because it's wrong, but because it's presented without empathy, without adaptation, without acknowledging the journey of those who start from the bottom. The impact of this is profound. People spend years paying for a car that's worth less and less, sacrificing mental health, leisure, and even better opportunities, all to maintain a decision that seemed inevitable at that moment. And here comes an important shift in mindset. Understanding that not following the rules doesn't make someone irresponsible, but ignoring the risks of the system can be extremely costly. There's a huge difference between conscious adaptation and blind acceptance of unfair conditions. This is a silent but powerful transformation that begins when you realize the problem isn't with you, but with the decisions the system pushes you to make too quickly. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because from this understanding arises a question that changes everything. If the system is like this, how can we make better decisions without blaming ourselves and without sabotaging ourselves financially in the long run? Comment below. This makes sense to me, if this reflection resonates with your reality. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's a point that's almost never made clear. The real danger that arises when the 24/10 rule is simply ignored. Not out of rebellion, not out of irresponsibility, but out of necessity, pressure, or misinformation. This is where many financial stories begin to get complicated without the person realizing it. At first, everything seems to be going well. The payment fits more or less within the budget. The car is in the garage. There's a feeling of progress, of accomplishment, that something has finally come to fruition. But this feeling usually doesn't last long. Over time, the payment that seemed manageable starts competing for space with rent, groceries, basic bills, and unexpected expenses. The budget becomes increasingly tight, and what should have brought mobility begins to generate constant anxiety. This is a silent but profound impact. When financing is too long, the tables turn against you. Interest keeps accruing while income stagnates. The car depreciates rapidly, but the debt remains heavy, almost immobile. There comes a point where the amount you still owe is greater than the car is worth. This is one of the hidden truths of financing. You feel like you're moving forward, but financially you're going in circles. And this affects future decisions, opportunities, and even how you view money. Another problem that is rarely discussed is the false sense of progress. A new car creates the illusion that life is moving forward, when in practice, assets don't grow, savings don't exist, and financial freedom becomes increasingly distant. Many people enter adulthood believing this is the natural path, and end up turning the car into the first major financial mistake of their journey. Not because the car is the villain, but because the timing and conditions weren't respected. Financial suffocation doesn't happen all at once. It comes in layers. First, you stop saving money. Then, you start postponing bills. Next, any unforeseen event becomes a huge problem. And without realizing it, the car starts controlling your choices. Jobs are accepted only to keep up with the payments. Dreams are postponed. Mental health suffers. This is the Odyssey. Behind-the-scenes reality that rarely appears in advertisements and easy speeches about achievement. Using fear here isn't about paralysis, but about raising awareness. Completely ignoring the 4-20-10 rule isn't a sign of courage or failure. It's simply too high a risk when there's no planning. The impact of this decision can stay with someone for years, shaping their relationship with money, consumption, and even self-esteem. Understanding this is part of a necessary transformation, especially for those trying to build something solid from little. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because after clearly understanding these risks, an inevitable question arises. If ignoring the rule can become a trap, how can this concept be adapted to the reality of those who earn little without destroying themselves financially? Comment below. This makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because here's the part that almost no one has the courage to say clearly. A rule 24-10 was not created to be a prison. It is not a label separating those who can from those who cannot. It is, in essence, a protection guide, a risk map. The problem begins when it is presented as an absolute obligation, disconnected from the reality of those who are taking their first steps on this financial journey. For those who earn little, using this rule as a reference, and not as a blind imposition, already changes everything. This requires a shift in mindset. Instead of thinking, either I follow the rule perfectly or I fail, the question becomes different. Which part of this rule helps me avoid financial harm right now? This simple change alters decisions, reduces guilt, and returns control to those who always felt they were playing an unfair game. Adapting the rules isn't about ignoring warning signs, it's about understanding their underlying mechanism. A cheaper car, for example, isn't a sign of being behind in life, but of strategy. Postponing a purchase isn't failure either. It's preparation. Saving more for a down payment, even if it takes longer, reduces interest rates, reduces financial strain, and increases options later on. And, at certain points in the journey, the smartest decision might be precisely not to finance now. This is one of the hardest revelations to accept because it goes against social pressure, against constant comparison, and against the idea of immediate progress. Financial inclusion isn't about consuming what everyone else consumes, but about protecting the future, even when starting small. The impact of this becomes apparent over time. Less anxiety, more flexibility, more room for unforeseen events. Money ceases to be a constant enemy and becomes a tool. And this completely changes the relationship with work, choices, and dreams. There's a hidden truth here that's rarely spoken. Those who respect their own limits today create freedom tomorrow. It's not about denying desires. It's about choosing the right moment. The 4-20-10 rule, when properly understood, doesn't say you can't. It says, be careful. And this care is an act of empowerment, not exclusion. This is how small, seemingly simple decisions build a more solid foundation along the journey. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because after understanding that adapting is more important than blindly obeying, something even more relevant emerges. How to transform this awareness into practical decisions aligned with your reality without falling into the same old traps again. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. If you've made it this far, it's because this conversation touched on something real in your life. So, if this content helped you see car financing more clearly, subscribe to the channel to continue following this type of practical reflection, without empty promises and without discourse detached from reality. The idea here is to walk together, talking about money in an honest, applicable, and human way. If that makes sense to you, leave a comment writing, "I'm with you until the end." This shows me that the message reached the other side and helps the channel reach more people who are going through the same decisions and doubts as you. And if at any point you thought, "That's me," leave a like as a way to reinforce that connection. It's not just a click, it's a sign that this type of content needs to continue existing here. There's a video over here that perfectly complements this topic and delves even deeper into these everyday decisions. Click on it and continue reading.